Welcome to our session today titled The Impact of Inclusive Model Demonstration Sites, Making Our Classrooms Work for Each Student. On the slide, you'll find photos of all of us. Hi, I'm Cassie Martin, Project Director of the University of Washington Herring Center's IPP Demonstration Sites Project. There's a great team joining me today, and I'm going to pass it along to let them introduce themselves moving down the line.
Hi, my name is Rena Marie Leon Guerrero. I'm an inclusion specialist at the UW Herring Center.
Hi, my name is Naomi Fair. I'm also an inclusion specialist.
Hi, my name is Christina Novak, and I'm also an inclusion specialist.
Hi, my name is Heather Chase, and I'm the principal at Chase Middle School.
Well, we have 3 objectives for this session, which includes helping participants understand the steps for creating model demonstration sites and highlighting inclusionary practices in their own contexts, identifying the impact of these sites when they share inclusionary practices with other schools, and the impact on the demonstration sites themselves, and to learn strategies to create professional networks and the ways professional networks contribute to and build capacity district-wide. Here's just a little background information about the Demonstration Sites Project. In the fall of 2019, OSPI launched the Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Project. The Herring Center at the University of Washington partnered with OSPI to coordinate and lead this part of the larger project. This part is creating model demonstration sites that highlight inclusionary practices across the state of Washington. The Demonstration Sites Project was developed to provide educators from around the state with the opportunity to observe inclusionary practices in action, meet with school teams, collect artifacts that aid in systems change, and to learn about how to implement inclusionary practices in different school contexts. By the winter of 2021, we identified 60 model demonstration sites, pre-K through 12, across all 9 education service regions in Washington state to provide professional development to visiting schools. Our demonstration sites highlight the diversity in our state. They include urban schools, rural schools, and schools in some of our largest and smallest districts across Washington. In collaboration with Herring Center inclusion specialists, demonstration sites host visiting schools to showcase high leverage inclusionary practices. By sharing these practices and opening their doors to teachers, administrators, families, and community members, it allows visitors to see best practices in action and apply them in their schools. At the same time, the demonstration sites themselves continue to grow their inclusive cultures and refine their practices that contribute to equitable learning for all students. As we know, we had to shift and change the way we are sharing out our demonstration site stories during the global pandemic. And a little later on, Rita Marie will talk about how we did that and continue to make an impact a little bit later on. We're happy to announce that we are finally back in action, providing both virtual visits and now in-person visits for educators and families across Washington state to our demonstration site schools.
Our demonstration sites are spread out across Washington state and highlight a variety of inclusionary practices. For example, Hidden River Middle School in Monroe School District focuses on inclusive PLCs, multi-tiered systems of support, and highlights an inclusive master schedule. Ruby Bridges Elementary showcases co-teaching, co-planning, master schedule, and flexible service delivery. We have Brennan K-8 on the Olympic Peninsula in Jefferson County, a school of 80 students. Brennan highlights their differentiated instruction and family engagement. Evergreen High School in Clark County is another one of our exemplar sites that showcases co-planning and co-teaching and how these inclusionary practices have shifted and changed the culture of their school. This provides just a few examples of the inclusionary practices our current 11 demonstration sites are sharing as part of their larger school journey.
There are a few founding principles that drive our model demonstrations work. First and foremost, we recognize that inclusive education requires a cultural shift in philosophy and practice throughout a school community. This is not a special education initiative, but a school-wide commitment. In fact, if we simply change the way we deliver special education services without considering the culture of the school or how all students engage in teaching and learn, or students and teachers engage in teaching and learning, we will never make the changes we need to truly impact student learning. Another principle that guides our work is a firm belief that in every school there are things that are working well. In education, we tend to examine the problems associated with our practices while under-examining what's working well, why it's working well, and how we can use that information to make things even better. We feel that this asset-based approach allows schools to leverage their strengths to become more inclusive. Sharing the stories of inclusive school journeys is another crucial component of our project. Through the course of our webinars and by way of virtual and in-person visits, districts, schools, and communities can learn more about what steps are taken to engage in inclusive school change. This includes not only sharing inclusive strategies, school-wide systems and structures, and team planning tools, but also why schools committed to this journey in the first place and how they engaged diverse stakeholders in the process to facilitate lasting and sustainable change. Each of the demonstration sites in our project are in various stages of their journeys as inclusive schools, and whether they are in year 1 of their journey or if they are 6 years in, they all have continuous plans for improvement, guided by innovative site-based leadership and the voices of those diverse stakeholders. They recognize that as new students and staff join their communities, and as they collect more information about the best ways students and staff learn, their professional practices need to reflect that learning in responsive and meaningful ways. As we move forward in today's presentation, we want to center the why in this work. There are so many stories and experiences and events that shape why inclusion matters to each and every one of us. It might be our own personal stories, experiences, and relationships, or professional ones. We might be responding to what the 80 years of research tells us about the benefits of inclusive schools for all students. What speaks to us most might be our beliefs and commitments to equity, racial and disability justice, or our commitments to creating a sense of belonging and self-determination for all students that they might carry with them beyond their years in school. When we consider the why, we must also acknowledge the ways our schools have contributed to the marginalization of students whose identities exist at the intersections of multiple systems of oppression. This means that there are many barriers in our schools, whether they are institutional or interpersonal, that reinforce exclusion and students' experiences of oppression. This work requires commitment, inquiry, and collaboration to really begin removing those barriers and pursuing educational justice through inclusive school change. Our Washington State demonstration sites are addressing inequities in education, and they're working to create more equitable learning environments. They're engaging with families and communities to change the present and future landscapes in our schools. Today, we'd like to highlight one of our demonstration sites, Chase Middle School in the Spokane School District, as they are truly leaders in this critical work. We'd like to introduce you to Chase and their inclusive school culture by sharing with you their mission that students see and hear each day. And that is that at Chase, all students belong, all learn, and all lead.
Imagine for a minute, your student has struggled through their elementary years, and finally, towards the end of 6th grade, your student had an evaluation and now has an IEP in place to provide the appropriate supports as they're moving into 7th grade in a new middle school. You are so excited because you now know your student is going to get the necessary supports. Now let's fast forward to the end of the school year, and you come in for the annual IEP meeting and to talk about the progress your students made, and you find out your student has only made a 1/5 of a year's growth in their math class. At this rate, by the time they graduate high school, they will only have made 1 academic year's growth in 5 more years. Think about this from a parent lens, from a teacher's lens, and from an administrator's lens for a minute, please. The scenario we were just thinking about is part of our why at Chase Middle School. This was happening at our school. So we'll begin with our why. When reviewing the data from our 2017-2018 school year, from our pull-out resource math and ELA classes, we found students were both not accessing the core grade level standards and they were not making marked progress. Our ELA students were making a half of a year's growth in a year, and our math students were making a fifth of a year's growth. We have a commitment and a responsibility to teach students and have collective ownership over student growth. After reviewing the data, our solution was to have all special education teachers teach the Common Core state standards within the context of the pull-out resource classrooms. This required shifting and stretching mindsets. Not every teacher believes students receiving IEP services could learn the grade level standards, and not every special education teacher can teach the grade level standards in both ELA and math, as they are not the content specialists. So after a year of teaching the Common Core grade level standards in our pull-out resource classes, our team reflected on the data. And for ELA, our students were taught the Common Core state standards, and these students made 1.31 years growth. So they were making over a year's growth and starting to catch up with their peers. When we looked at our math classes, the students were not being taught the Common Core state standards on a regular basis, and these students made less than a half of a year's growth. We used the data to look at what is working well and what we needed to improve. Access to the core grade level standards was working well. However, segregated resource classrooms did not provide access to the general education classes or ensure all students were receiving grade level content. So we referenced the research and we made the decision to implement co-teaching. When we did this, we looked at the fact that now we would have a general education teacher who is a content specialist and a special education teacher who is a learning specialist. So our team decided to engage in ongoing PD and to learn more about co-teaching and refine our inclusionary practices. Co-taught ELA and math classes were created to ensure all students were accessing the core content, but other benefits of this were it provided an opportunity for our special education teachers to learn the curriculum alongside a content specialist. Our special education teachers were there to modify the curriculum or assignments when needed. The general education teacher had the opportunity to learn from the special education teacher on entry points and scaffolding instruction. The special education teacher was co-teaching the grade level standards in the co-taught class, and then the expectation was that they would teach those same standards with the appropriate modifications to their pull-out resource classes. So this provided us a continuum of services for all students that didn't just benefit our students with IEPs, but we know we have many struggling learners that could use the support of having both a content specialist and a learning specialist in the classroom. So as we're looking at this slide, you can see where the teachers had co-planning time that was built into the master schedule. So if you look at the bottom two, Mr. Wiederspan and Ms. Whitsett, they co-taught 2 English classes, second and third period. And then they had a common prep later in the day for a 5th period. So they were always had that time to be able to work together on a daily basis to plan their lessons, to look at student work at the end of the day. And the other piece that if you look is then on 6th period, it says 7th ELA targeted. So then Mr. Wiederspan was the special education teacher. And so he would take those same standards that they had taught in the co-taught classes and do any necessary modifications and then put that in place during his 6th period resource pullout class to make sure that all of our students were getting the Common Core state standards.
Thank you, Heather. So our goals for the demonstration sites project are both simple and complex. We want to make sure that when school personnel or teams visit demonstration sites or hear about their journeys, that they are provided with a transformational learning experience. So to do this, our IPP demonstration sites are studying and implementing best practices in model demonstration site replication to ensure that our visitors or participants have an experience where they're inspired and leave with ideas for implementation in their schools. Additionally, we want to create peer learning communities between demonstration sites that build professional networks in our state. Through this project, we aren't only practicing impacting visiting schools, but we're working with demonstration sites to continue to evolve and change as they learn more about their students and best practices, or as the school culture continues to change. Because one of our founding principles is that inclusion is a cultural shift in philosophy and practice. Demonstration sites show that when we shift our mindsets, put best practices in place for students with disabilities, and consider how we can implement these practices in general education contexts and in content, it improves outcomes for all students in our schools. Another important goal for this project is to improve the social and academic outcomes for students with and without disabilities, as well as to show that when we do things that are better for students, it's typically better for adults too. As we share some of what demonstration sites are doing to innovate and sharing some of the challenges, our goal is for visitors to leave with some key takeaways that you can bring with them to their school teams. This includes information, tools, and supports school districts can use to build, implement, and sustain an inclusive school. During the pandemic, we have been offering that learning about our demonstration sites through our webinars, virtual visits, and artifacts. As our demonstration sites are now opening their doors, we are excited as schools are taking the opportunity to engage in that professional learning through in-person visits as the initial model of this project.
When we look at some of the key moves at Chase Middle School, one of them was for our teachers to be able to share our story. This provided our teachers a sense of pride as they looked at where we were a couple years ago and where we are now, and it was a real morale booster for our teachers. Also, as they were working on co-teaching, they were using some professional networking with other schools and seeing what was working in other schools that they could bring back to Chase Middle School. Co-teaching allows Chase Middle School to have a continuum of services to provide academic supports for all students. Again, we've said this, but we do have many struggling learners with IEP services or without IEP services that benefit from having both the content specialist and the learning specialist in the classroom. Our general education teachers increase their skills with working with students with learning disabilities, and our special education teachers increase their content knowledge of both ELA and math. We've noticed that by having our continuum of services and having this practice for our teachers, it gave them the ability to be able to work with all students at Chase Middle School. We did have, at the beginning when we started this process, not everybody was bought into co-teaching, and not everyone was bought into the fact that inclusion is best for all students. So one of our teachers that didn't actually think that this was the best place for her students, she was a special education student or special education teacher. I'm just going to share her mind shift and what she shared after doing this for a year and seeing the improvements of her students. Jumping to last year, the first year of co-teaching, something new, another change, more apprehension, and a mind shift. At first, I wasn't sure if some of my students who would typically be in a resource class could manage being in a general education co-taught class. I knew the students who would be in my resource class would struggle. I worried they would struggle to the point of giving up. I thought they could not do some of the math. How could they when they are missing so many foundational skills? However, over time, I realized this was the best place for them. They were finally getting to be involved in their own learning. They were becoming better thinkers and problem solvers. I was able to see students who came to me with multiplication goals fly through and understand linear equations. One student who had a telling time goal became one of our top students. They were thriving. Would they master the content in the same way and the same time as their peers? Not all of them, but they were still capable of learning the same information. Before I knew what was happening, I had a complete mind shift. I knew my kiddos were capable of learning. I just didn't realize how much they can learn in the same amount of time as their typically developing peers. For the first time in my teaching career, I was able to see firsthand what was meant by least restrictive environment with lower level learners. And this was this teacher's 8th year of teaching.
So in response to our partnership and our work with our demonstration sites and visiting schools, and through working with our demonstration sites on their continuous paths for improvement, we learned that schools are wanting more guidance on principles and practices for both building and sustaining inclusive schools. So from our work and from the research, we identified 7 areas: an inclusive mission and vision, inclusive master schedules, collaborative structures, flexible supports and services, inclusionary practices, inclusive IEPs, and sustained family and community partnerships. We noticed that there might be some schools that were implementing some inclusionary practices, but still had segregated programs, or leaving some students out of their definition of all means all. We also noticed that without a master schedule that prioritized inclusion and opportunities for collaboration, building and sustaining an inclusive school just wasn't possible. As a result, we identified the different practices necessary and put together a process in a sort of order, not necessarily meaning that some principles and practices couldn't occur or be created or practiced and implemented simultaneously, but to provide more information about each area and the steps that might be relevant for implementation or sustainability, and then linked each area to artifacts, most of which were created by our IPP demonstration sites or IPP demonstration sites project partners.
Thank you. As Cassie shared the principles and practices that the demonstration sites team is putting together, we look at where to leverage those inclusionary practices. And looking back at Chase on a path of continuous growth, the above timeline graphic illustrates the onset of their journey that Heather shared in previous slides. Chase Middle School moved from educating students with IEPs in separate classrooms to teaching Common Core grade level standards in co-taught classrooms. Their continuous growth has them on a path to continue to expand co-teaching. And next, Heather will share a little bit more on Chase Middle School's continuous growth plan.
As we were working through our process, we realized our master schedule was a driving force for both instruction and supports. And so when we realized that we had to have co-teaching, we needed a master schedule that supported co-teaching, which meant that our co-teachers had to have a common prep. So these are things that we put in place right away. If they didn't have a common prep, we couldn't expect them to be co-teaching, co-planning, and co-assessing. And that was the expectation when we went to this model. So that was something that we did right away. What we've been working on this year is expanding our co-teaching, so it's not just in our math and our ELA classes. We now have co-teaching in our 7th grade science classes. We're also looking constantly at how do we get better at co-teaching. So we're bringing in more book studies, talking about the 6 different types of co-teaching. When is it best to do which part of the co-teaching, and just really working together as a team on that. The other thing that we built in now with our master schedule is not just the co-planning time for our co-teachers. We now have we have common preps by core content and grade level. So all 7th grade math teachers have a common prep. All 8th grade English teachers have a common prep. All 8th grade history teachers have a common prep. And so this time is used for them to all be on the same page, to be looking at how they're assessing students, looking at student growth, looking at the data, and we're really looking at using the UDL framework for planning so that we are removing barriers before the start of class. So when we're planning, we're thinking what barriers are already there and what can I do? Can I let the kids listen to this story if they can't read the story? Can I let them use talk to text? What are the different things each of my individual kids needs to be able to remove those barriers? We also have implemented Character Strong as a social emotional learning curriculum school-wide at Chase Middle School. And some of our next steps will be to continue working within the UDL framework for planning for all of our students and removing barriers. And also we are really looking at grading for equity and what does that look like? We really want our grades to reflect student progress. And so we're having those conversations now.
Thanks, Heather. The Demonstration Sites project seeks to provide a transformational experience for visiting schools, both in person and virtually. Shifting virtually in response to COVID actually increased reach. Many more people were able to access webinars from across the state. Additionally, webinars were recorded and themselves became an artifact to share. Although virtual formats provided reach, there is still value of in-person visits to see demonstration sites engaging in inclusionary practices and witnessing the structures which support these practices. The above graphic with 3 circles cascading down illustrates how we were able to provide a transformational learning experience. In the spring of 2020, our project pivoted to respond to distance learning needs in our communities, and we moved our in-person demonstration sites to virtual webinars. With our first cohort, 5 demonstration sites shared both an overview of their school's journey and a deep dive into an inclusionary practice. Deep dives included multi-tiered systems of support, positive behavior support interventions, collaboration, and co-teaching and co-planning. These webinars were created both in response to attendees' evaluation feedback and asking us for a deep dive, as well as the demonstration sites themselves wanting an opportunity to go more in depth around specific inclusionary practices. Although with the webinar virtual visits, demonstration sites provide artifacts to include master schedules, handbooks, tools they have used and continue to use on their journey to becoming a more inclusive school. Now, in the 2021 school year, cohorts 1 and 2 hosted virtual visits and open houses for individual school teams. Through these virtual visits, school teams were able to meet with demonstration sites. Currently, in the 21-22 school year, most of our demonstration sites are able to host in-person visits. When visiting teams request a visit from our website, we take that information to match them to demonstration site based on the inclusionary practices they are interested in learning more about. Therefore, visits are tailored to the interests and needs of the visitors. Further, inclusion specialists engage visitors with pre-planning and sharing our observational impact form. Here is a little more about how we have been engaging in, sharing, and disseminating our demonstration sites work. Our goals for the demonstration site project have been achieved across 3 main activities. First, in yellow, are virtual visits where schools share an overview of their school's journey and an in-depth look into an inclusionary practices. Second, in blue, are projects designed to build professional networks and disseminate information. We have taken the feedback from our demonstration sites, as we are also on a path of continuous growth, and created more opportunities to meaningfully connect and build professional networks. Last, in green are ways in which the demonstration sites are moving forward on their path of continuous growth. The UW-Herring Center Inclusion Specialists are not only working with the schools to help capture their journey, work on a model demonstration site replication and dissemination, but also are responsive to the demonstration site's professional development needs and either provide that professional learning or source PD for our demonstration sites so they can continue on the path of their continuous growth.
So because the IPP Demonstration Sites project aims to have a significant impact on inclusive practices across Washington state, we wanted to make sure that when school personnel or teams visit our demonstration sites or hear their stories, that it provides that transformational learning experience. To do this, our demonstration sites have engaged in professional learning about storytelling, which Naomi will talk about in just a minute. Our team and our demonstration sites have also studied and are implementing best practices in model demonstration site replication and dissemination to ensure that our visitors have an experience where they're inspired and leave with ideas for implementation in their schools. We have a goal to create peer learning communities between demonstration sites that build professional networks in our state. We are collecting impact forms from our demonstration sites to determine what visiting schools are taking away from our sites, and satisfaction surveys filled out by our demonstration sites about our UW partnership in order to collect information about the efficacy and additional needs they might have partnering with our Herring Center inclusion specialists. The goal is to have the most salient information and to put structures in place so this is a capacity building process where we step back from helping to facilitate systemic change and schools and districts self-sustain their inclusive cultures. We don't want people to say when they visit our demonstration sites, I want to move to that school, but rather, I want to do that at my school.
As we researched for this project, we aimed to uncover what practices were essential to have lasting impact on education reform. Storytelling came to the forefront of our research time after time. We knew telling the stories of our demonstration sites was going to be a critical part of our work. Our demonstration sites engaged in a summer institute focused on storytelling. An award-winning NPR journalist, Gabrielle Spitzer, worked with our demonstration sites on how to most effectively tell a story. Our Herring Center team and the IPP demonstration sites teams learned how to put a story together, including ways to cut through the noise and emphasize the human part of the story. They learned that not only is it okay to not have it all figured out, but this imperfection and complexity is actually helpful for others to understand as they go through their own journeys towards inclusive education. While our storytelling was intended to make an impact on our visiting schools, it also ended up having impact on the demonstration sites themselves. These sites developed a deeper and more connected relationship to their story and school's inclusive education journey, as Heather shared about today. Sharing their stories of the successes and struggles have had an enormous impact across our state in growing the commitments to the work, as well as growing supportive collaborative professional networks to move the work forward system-wide.
As part of our statewide project, we're also examining professional networks, collaborations, and learning communities among and between schools who visit our IPP demonstration sites. These professional networks provide us with another measurement to determine the reach of our demonstration sites across Washington state. For example, schools that adopt and implement what they learn from our IPP demonstration sites in their own school context. Additionally, we are using social network analysis to understand, monitor, and evaluate the implementation process of inclusionary practices in participating schools. Social network analysis is a well-validated methodology for investigating collaboration and intervention diffusion through graphical analysis. This methodology allows us to identify, connect, and demonstration sites within professional networks. For example, we're able to identify how schools are connected through school visits, shared materials, and communication. This data will help to provide information to schools across the state about what schools are hubs for specific inclusionary practice and or how schools are responding to one another. We provide similar information in our by the numbers section on our website that provides helpful information about who we need to engage further. To provide a brief explanation of the data you see on your slides, we surveyed out demonstration sites in the fall of 2020 to collect baselines, and then again in the spring of 2021. We asked the following question: with whom have you shared materials, resources, artifacts, or information about inclusionary practices? This visual representation of our baseline social network analysis showed that not many schools were entering this work with strong connections with other schools. But by the spring of 2021, many connections had been established between demonstration sites, as well as with schools outside of the project. In this data set, we see blue circles highlighting school sites that were involved in the sharing of resources and materials, while yellow circles indicate those who were requesting or consuming of the materials. The number in the parentheses indicates the number of schools that voted for a particular school. The larger circles equates to the greater number of votes the school received. The black text indicates schools that are participating demonstration sites, and the red text indicates schools that are non-demonstration sites. Finally, the lines on the images show the connections. Thus, our professional network analysis data shows that even in a pandemic year of physical quarantining and virtual learning, an educational community can connect and collaborate in a way that centers inclusion and educator learning. We hope to continue to see these professional networks continue to grow.
Thank you, Christina. When schools visit our sites, they complete a pre-observation form so that the demonstration sites are aware of what they are looking for upon their visit. It asks us such questions as, what do you hope to learn from your visit to bring back to your school community? And what questions do you want to explore today? Then it moves to the observation section that they can fill out when visiting demonstration sites, asking what they see students doing and what they see educators doing, and the systems, culture, leadership practices that they see to support inclusive educators, just to name a few. Finally, there's a reflection and post-observation takeaway section that is shared with our team and in debrief with our IPP demonstration sites. In this section, visiting schools identify some of the initial steps they could take back and implement in their schools based on the visit. And, in order to make sure that we at the University of Washington are providing the kinds of professional development and support and feedback our IPP demonstration sites need, we also had demonstration sites fill out satisfaction surveys about our support in the areas of communication and support, the resources we provide or develop alongside them, the services we offer, coaching practices, and their overall satisfaction with our work. We also asked for their feedback about how we can improve, modeling that behavior and demonstrating our own commitment and belief in a continuous path of improvement. We received some great feedback from our demonstration sites at the end of the second year that included ideas to structure professional networking, ideas for different types of professional learning, and by taking an appreciative approach, also things we did well that our demonstration sites would like more of. And as we are entering or embarking on years 3 and 4 of the Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Project, we're continuing to partner with Washington State Schools to make sure everyone is taking the opportunity to engage in and learn about how we can work together to improve outcomes for all of our students, and especially for students who have been historically or are currently marginalized in our public schools. There continues to be barriers in terms of systems, attitudes, and beliefs that are reinforced around students with more significant support needs, and our team is working hard with the IPP demonstration sites this year to uncover and shift some of the inequitable structures, systems, and beliefs that exist in schools. And we really hope to double down on this in years 3 and 4. We are really looking to make a shift in schools from thinking about inclusionary practices as isolated instructional practices to reimagining how to create an inclusive school culture and the systems to support that work. OSPI and the IPP professional development priorities for years 3 and 4 include centering racial equity and intersectionality with disability, engaging families as decision makers and co-designers, and including student voice and opportunities for self-advocacy across our general education system. As I mentioned, we additionally did not see the kind of movement that we would like to include students with significant disabilities in our general education communities. So we're really partnering with our demonstration sites on their efforts around inclusionary practices to support each and every student, because we know inclusion works for everyone.
Thanks, Cassie, and thank you, Heather, for sharing an overview of Chase Middle School's inclusive journey. Chase Middle School highlights the goals of the demonstration sites. We've heard about the cultural shift in philosophy and practice. They share their story to provide transformational learning experiences, and they have a fierce commitment to continuous improvement. With their continuous path of improvement, they've identified actual items to continue to build on their strengths, again, taking that asset-based approach. And Chase also demonstrates distributive leadership to elevate leaders within the building and build capacity. And lastly, as Chase looks to build capacity and sustainability across the district for inclusive practices and equitable education district-wide.
That is a little bit about the Demonstration Sites project, goals, founding principles, and impact. To learn more about the Demonstration Sites project and OSPI's Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Project, and to learn more about Chase Middle School in Spokane, Washington, or to view any of their webinar recordings, PowerPoints, or artifacts from Chase and all of our IPP demonstration sites, please visit these websites and feel free to email us at uwdemosites@uw.edu.
Thank you for joining our presentation today to learn more about the impact of inclusive model demonstration sites, making our classrooms work for each student. A special thank you to Chase Middle School and Principal Heather Chase for sharing one of our demonstration sites' inclusive and ongoing journey. Thank you.